slaves to freedom.
The journey across the lines of segregation. In tune with the civil rights movement, blacks were crossing the lines of segregation that they dared to cross, while the police were in pursuit with dogs, horses, and water hoses, trying to turn them back. But they kept crossing the lines of segregation at lunch counters, at hotels, at public parks and libraries, churches, schools, and colleges, with the police and mobs in pursuit who attacked them with dogs and water hoses, who shocked them with cattle prods, who tortured and beat them, and spilled the blood of the young and old, trying to turn them back. But they kept crossing the lines of segregation, and they kept on crossing the line until Congress passed the Civil Rights Act.
When I hear the voice of Jesse Jackson, in his voice I hear the voice of my ancestors, the nameless voice of human cargo, the voice of Harriet Tubman, who was the North Star of freedom. And in his voice I hear the voice of Sojourner Truth, the leader of the abolitionist movement. In his voice I hear the voice of Frederick Douglass, who was the forerunner of the civil rights movement. In his voice I hear the voice of Carter G. Woodson, the founder of African American History Month. In his voice I hear the voice of Roy Wilkins, leader of the NAACP, who led the legal fight for justice in the courts. In his voice I hear the voice of Thurgood Marshall, who changed the law of the land. In his voice I hear the voice of Dr. Martin Luther King, who led the leader of the civil rights movement.
The sunshine of hope. Enduring the humiliation of the nation with yesterday's unjust laws of segregation and discrimination, Dr. Martin Luther King brought hope to the nation for those who struggled for a new emancipation. With his sunshine of hope, he inspired a new generation to rise above the decades of oppression with a vision for a new nation, free from the bond of segregation. The dream that inflamed the fires of freedom. In the Ivy halls of college, I found a dream within a dream, an unfulfilled dream, embedded in the Declaration of Independence, that all men are created equal. With vigor and enthusiasm, I represented that dream to the nation, and the fires of freedom were inflamed from the Delta of Mississippi to the ghettos of Chicago.
Dr. Martin Luther King were here. If he were here, his dream would be freedom. Freedom from the pains of hunger and poverty. Freedom from the agony and tragedies of war. Freedom from the bond of illiteracy that impedes our progress. Everywhere his voice cries out, let freedom reign. If he were here, his dream would be freedom. Freedom from the burden of drug-infested schools. Freedom from the rising rate of teenage pregnancy. Everywhere his voice cries out, let freedom reign. If he were here, his dream would be freedom. Freedom from violence, freedom from the turmoils of drive-by shootings, freedom from the prison of barred windows and doors. Everywhere his voice cries out, let freedom reign. If he were here, his dream would be freedom. Freedom from the fear of carjacking, freedom from the fear of worship at night, freedom from the fear of strolling in beautiful parks. Everywhere his voice cries out, let freedom reign. If he were here, his dream would be freedom. Freedom from the ongoing system of wasted black lives, freedom from the shackles of shattered lives, freedom from the yoke of racism. Everywhere his voice cries out, let freedom reign. If he were here, his dream would be freedom. Freedom from corruption and greed, freedom from envy and hypocrisy, freedom from hate and ill will. Everywhere his voice cries out, let freedom reign.
The freedom fighters. The freedom fighters, black and white, were united, who could not be turned back. Their cause was our cause, said President Johnson, who signed the 1964 Civil Rights Act, fighting to end segregation on interstate buses. The freedom fighters headed south on integrated buses, who were met by police and Klan brutality in Montgomery, which forced the freedom fighters to turn back and regroup.